Welcome back. So, today I'm going to talk to you about something that's kind of crazy but true. You see, the movie Inception, the concepts inside of it are actually real and are practiced all the time. So, so often is the case in our culture in general that things that are kind of on the fringe or people are trying to get into the light without scaring people or triggering some kind of retaliation for leaking information are often put out in jokes, in pop culture, in movies. This way, when this stuff comes out, it gets people thinking without triggering the establishment to come down on them. You see, the idea of Inception, if you haven't watched the movie, spoiler alert, but the general premise of Inception is that people could use these machines to invade your dream in order to extract information from you. And that's called extraction, of course, but inception is to plant an idea which would grow in you and would come to define you. You see, the idea that someone can plant an idea in another person's head in a movie, it sounds kind of far fetched, right? It's not. It's actually completely true. You see, how many times have you watched those shows where someone will be like tied to a chair in a room and it'll come over the loudspeaker for hours and hours and days? You work for no one but us. Everyone knows that brainwashing is actually a legitimate thing in this world, but we don't pay attention to it. So if the tool exists, do you ignore it or do you use it? You see, if you don't have the knowledge on your side, it'll be done to you rather than you doing it for yourself. You see, more than 10 years ago, I was going through a really rough patch in my life, and someone kept telling me a phrase, a specific word, really, over and over and over again for 2 months. I thought my armor was really strong, I thought I was very resistant to this kind of stuff, but I remember the first couple dozen times over this period of time, I kept saying, "No, that's not true. That's not true. That's nonsense." But over time, no matter how much I didn't want to believe it, I remember like 2 months in, I'm all by myself, and then this word flashes in my mind, and I'm just stopped, and I was like, "Uh oh." I knew I was in trouble then, and I literally spent the next 10 years acting it out, whether I wanted to or not. You see, once an idea is planted in your head, it's there and it's going to be acted out. Your brain works in such a way that subconscious ideas and beliefs are acted out, whether you want them to or not. It has to prove consistently that this, whatever it believes to be true, is true. And if it has to send you emotions, thoughts, urges, whatever, in order to make these things happen, it does it. Where do you think these urges for certain things come from? You think you just like, oh, that's just the way it is? Uh-uh. It's not true. You see, why do some people, have urges for one thing and another person has no interest in it at all? You think it's just an accident that happens? It's not. You see, these are mechanisms that we operate under. Whether you want to or not, you were born this way. So these mechanisms are constantly in play. And if you don't use it for yourself, it will be used on you, like it was on me. And the only way to, like for me personally, the word that came to define me, whether I wanted to or not, was worthless. I said it was a rough patch in my life. It wasn't, nice things happening. And I literally acted this out for 10 years. And the mind will come up with all sorts of reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, or acting the way I'm acting, or not acting when I know I should be, or not speaking up. You see, in order to counteract something, because I can't reach in my head and pull out what's already there, I need to have two conflicting statements. And just like in Inception, if you haven't watched the movie, I strongly recommend you do so. It's an amazing movie, and it's really chock full of good information. You see, I remember the star DiCaprio saying he's like positive emotion trumps negative emotion every time. It's actually true. So if you have one idea that's negative and one idea that's positive and they're in conflict with each other, the idea that's positive is going to win. With all thing else being equal, and then we get into momentum, which is a totally different thing. But so if the word that's defining me is worthless, I had to put in a counter word, and that was worthy. You see, you can't be worthless and worthy at the same time. It just doesn't, it doesn't equal out. So the brain has both in front of it. What's it going to pick? Well, under these rules, it's going to pick the one that has the stronger charge. And that's the positive emotion. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, there are now charts and like frequency charts, that actually have an actual energy scale for different human emotions. And love being 500 and fear being 100. You see, everything you experience actually has a numerical value attached to it. So, for instance, if something positive rates far higher on the scale than a negative emotion, and you have two, counteracting statements, then the brain is like, okay, which is stronger? Well, the one with the stronger charge is stronger. And in this case, it was the positive one, which is almost always that way. So it went with that one, and then literally the world changed because once again, the mind has to prove it. So it's like, okay, you're not worthless anymore, you're worthy. So I need to prove this constantly, just like it did with the worthless one. It doesn't take a judgment call, it just takes it and runs with it. So instead of fighting myself to do anything, I turned myself, like, I became my own best friend instead of my worst enemy. And it was completely different. I acted, from a space of being driven to, rather than having to force myself through willpower. I was actually being driven internally to act out more positive behaviors, more behaviors that would consistently prove to myself that I'm worthy, that I'm worth it, that my ideas are good enough to be expressed, that, when I'm rejected for whatever reason, it's okay because I am whole in myself, that I'm worthy no matter the outside influence. You see, that's how it works. You're either worthy no matter the outside influence, or you're worthless no matter the outside influence. You see, it's internal computing system, and it's going to say this is true no matter what it is. As long as it's programmed in there, it says this is true. So people can do this to another person, or you can do it to yourself. Just like it was done to me, and I'm sure the person didn't know what they were doing. Most of us don't, but it works. They literally used a tool without knowing what they were doing with it. And then it took me 10 years later to actually come up to the point where I was shown that this was a tool and I had power over it, that I could use it, and so can you. See, if you're struggling all the time, that's not your environment. It's not. It's you. It's like, and this isn't a blame game, it's the truth. You see, once you take responsibility for it, you can do something about it. You see, if you don't take any responsibility for it, like whether or not you're like, but they did this to me. Well, you allowed this to be done. Have you ever said no to something and stood your ground? Could they ever make you do it against all your will? No, it doesn't work that way. It's impossible. They can't literally mind control you and force you to say wash the dishes, force you to hand over your paychecks to them, force you. It just doesn't work. It does not work. So use these tools for yourself. Now go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.